When you're developing with Azure Digital Twins, you spend a lot of time dealing with the models and the twins in the DTDL format. Jason from Telstra is here to show us a library that him and his team have open sourced that will make that work way easier. This is today on the IoT Show. Hey, hi everyone, this is the IoT Show. I'm Olivier, your host, and today I'm joined by Jason from Telstra to talk about developing for digital twins. Jason, how are you?
I'm good, Olivier. How are you?
I'm great. Enjoying the Seattle weather in this October, which is a bit chill already. How about you? Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Sydney, Australia, and the weather here is pretty good.
Well, you have summer coming up, right?
Yeah. Here it is a bit stormy in the summer, though. It's their wet season, as they call it.
Come on, stop complaining. Anyway, so a little bit more about yourself. Like, we know where you're coming from and where you're calling us from, but what are you doing in life? What is your job? Who are you working for?
Yeah, I work for a great company called Telstra. They're Australia's largest telecommunications company. There I'm IoT software architect. So I work really closely with their delivery teams to help build out new IoT offerings at scale for multiple customers.
Nice. So you've been one of the early adopters of the Azure Digital Twins service, and while working with Digital Twins, you've been taking an approach which is very interesting, which is a developer approach on how to work with models and twins and the service. And so tell me more a bit about what it was for you to work with Digital Twins. What was the experience? What were your takeaways?
Well, for me, it was new. Some elements of it. Most of my career, I've been involved in real-time systems and telemetry systems, and so I was fairly familiar with that side. But the approach that Microsoft's taken was very unique with real-time digital twins, and so I spent some time getting to understand it and trying to understand how we would bring this to market, how we would train our development teams, where we would emphasize and invest our time to be different, and where we would, wait for Microsoft to deliver certain elements in alignment with them. And so my experience was pretty good, actually. What we found, though, was that there was some harder elements that for developers to understand.
Okay. Well, especially as you were describing embedded developers, right? Because myself, when I first arrived in the Azure team, was coming from the Windows embedded group, and I was like, "What's going on here?" I was not really comfortable with the cloud and what it took to develop for the cloud. So, tell us a bit about what you identify as the main tasks. What is the Digital Twins developer life looking like?
Yeah. So digital twins developers are often thinking about the models, like the ontologies, as we call them. That's the class, think static structure of classes and how they relate. And then we also think about how we're going to represent changes in those models as events. And so as these changes happen in real time in the models, they trigger events, and then you have to handle those events to cause some functionality. So most of the time in the initial stages is spent figuring that out for the problem that you're solving.
Okay. So you showed me a very interesting slide earlier on, right, about what kind of tasks you were spending your time on. So how about you start walking us through what is that day-to-day of a digital twins developer looking like?
Yeah. So what we found is that there's a fair bit of time that we would spend putting together. It's kind of like the schema for digital twins. It's in a language called DTDL, which is a JSON-based language or JSON LD-based language. And to do that, we spent a lot of time on the twin model creation. That's kind of like the template of the class or of the digital twin. It's think in the case, like if you had an example of a building, the building would be the model and individual instances of a building would be the twins.
Yep.
Okay, so a lot of time spent creating those models. Then you have to spend some time reading and writing all the code to read and write the instances of the models. That's the code to read and write twins. And then we found that as projects progressed, that we had to make changes. And that required going back in to update those areas. And those weren't areas that we would normally update for other development efforts. And so it was kind of like additional work, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And we had the deployment of them. So we were pretty big proponents of CI/CD and DevSecOps and progressive DevOps practices. So we needed to get this properly automated in our pipelines so that it would auto-deploy the twin models to Azure Digital Twins when it was released to different environments.
Okay, and as as the slide is actually saying, there's not enough time in a day, and so I understand, have been implementing some very interesting library that not only you developed with your teams, but also made available as a GitHub project. And so, tell me more about how you approached the problem and how you developed that library that we're gonna see a demo of soon.
Yeah, so honestly, it was just trying to think of ways that developers think already that overlap with what's needed. Trying to align correctly so that we minimize the amount of time, but it still is a fit for purpose approach. And so what we found was that Entity Framework Core and the Entity Framework Code First approach was pretty. Most .NET developers know it. It's pretty common, especially senior ones. So by taking that approach, we were able to develop a Code First Digital Twins library that we then open sourced and made available to the public.
Well, you're going to have to walk me through then. We want to see it.
All right. Did you want me to show you the DTDL, what the DTDL looks like first, or you want me to go right into the code?
Yeah. So let's imagine we are new to digital twins. We understand the concepts. Things are based on JSON LD, which you can imagine as a developer, you're going to start doing serialization, deserialization, and so on. But yeah, you can definitely. I like the way you were saying, you were describing, the twins models as hey, this is a building, and you have a twin in there, which is this and that. I think this was a good starting point. So let's look at a model and in DTDL, and let's see how the library will help developers manage and work with that model using code.
Okay. Well, I created this one as an example to share today. It's just an example building. It's actually a cut down version of one of the models that we use in one of our solutions called Smart Spaces. And you can see here, it is JSON, but it's broken down. It has initial properties that describe the model. Then it has the contents. Contents is really about if you're using reflection on a class, it's the property info and method info of a class. So here you can see there's different properties described: name, address, city, state, zip code. And then down here, you'll see a different one, a relationship. And this is a relationship to another model, to a floor.
Okay. Yeah, I like the way you're talking about classes and reflection and so on. So it's really the developer hat talking here.
It's what developers know. Yeah. So
exactly.
Speak their language. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's interesting because that's the way you approach it. Other people might approach it differently, and so you're approaching it like that. So what were the next steps for you once you've been looking at the model like that?
Yeah, so the next step was, this was pretty straightforward to understand, but there's really two types of ways to serialize code first classes, and that's first as the model, and then second as an actual twin or an instance of the class. Okay. And this is what the DTDL looks like for an example twin. So you can see it's got its own special ID that's different from the model ID here. It has an E tag. It has a name, address, city, state, and zip code. And notice it does not show any floors in the schema here or in the JSON. That's because you update your relationships independently of the twin.
Okay.
Because it's a graph, relationships are first class. So they're much like, if you think of it a bit more like, they're kind of like first class citizens, and those familiar with the database, think of it kind of like they have their own table. You can have fields associated with them, etc.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, so from here, you have looked at the model, you have looked at the twin, and what's next?
All right, so this is essentially what we would write if we were going to write something for Entity Framework. Might be a little bit simpler than what we would do in production for Entity Framework. But as you can see, for C# developers, this is speaking their language.
It is, right?
Yeah, C#. Well, what we did is to make things a little bit easier on ourselves for writing the serialization code, easier on myself because I wrote a lot of it. We used attributes instead of directly reflecting the entire class. So we created a digital twin attribute. In that digital twin attribute, you can provide some of the metadata that's normally available to a twin model. For example, a version. In Azure Digital Twins, you can have many versions of the same thing.
Yep.
And all of them can be live, as well as a display name and a bunch of other fields that are optional.
Okay.
And then we instrument we decorate each property with a twin property. And then down here, you'll see at the bottom, we decorate this one with a twin relationship.
Really straightforward.
Yeah. And so, did you want me to go through the benefits to DevOps as well?
Carry on. I like where you're going.
Okay. So once you have this, like I said, one of the biggest benefits is getting into DevOps. So and so we take the builds, the source of truth, essentially for our twin models, and we serialize those into DTDL, and then we auto deploy those into ADT. And we have just by like a standard practice that we ask all the teams to follow. We break those models up into two types, what we call ontology-specific models and device-specific models. And that keeps things from getting too complicated, because as things grow here, the twin graphs can be very large and unwieldy.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is by managing them from using DevOps and using code, you can actually scale, and in a way that is easier to grasp and understand rather than the visual way of doing, right? Because we always talk about digital twins by showing the Digital Twin Explorer, where you can see, this very complicated graph of like many nodes connecting with each other with nice lines in between and so on. But it's okay for, a small house or building, but then you start getting lost, really rapidly into that visual way of seeing the twin, and you cannot do everything manually in there with the Digital Twins Explorer, right?
Actually, Digital Twins Explorer is pretty powerful. When we started, it wasn't as far along as it is now, and it's quite robust now. Actually, it's got its own. Did you want me to bring that up?
Yeah. Because I think it's interesting to see it in parallel as well for the same kind of models, and for people especially who are not familiar with digital twins to understand what's going on here.
All right, so I brought up this is one. It's a play environment that we work in at Telstra that has some example models in it and twins, just to show you the Digital Twin Explorer.
Okay.
You can see here, it shows you the exact instances, it shows you the relationships. As you click on these, you'll see the fields over on the right-hand side. This is actually right out of JSON. Actually, you just saw the DTDL example. So Use your
Yeah,
imagination.
should look familiar, right?
Yeah. And then you have a model graph, which um, is the class
Hmm.
view, yeah, which it's loading. You can see it keeps all the relationships, makes them visual. And then it's nice enough to show you these on the left side here,
Okay.
so that you can then work with them. So you can actually create instances directly from here of
Okay.
individual models, and you can upload your own models
Okay.
if you have the DTDL.
Yep, yep. So you can do that. You can do things. I agree with you. With Digital Explorer, Digital Twins Explorer.
Mm.
Maybe I was a bit harsh on this one. But as you were saying, you're going to start working with different version of models and twins, and you will definitely want to integrate that into your dev process. So DevOps integration is
Yeah, this isn't fit for
also
purpose for that. Agreed.
yeah.
It's great for exploration.
Exactly. Great for exploration, not so much for and you can still do things, right? You can do queries in there and test them and see how they work. But at the end of the day, what you want to do is code and leverage these queries that invoke
Exactly.
functionality of the service, right?
Yep.
Yeah. But still you have that step which is working with the JSON LD or DTDL files, which in your code might not be trivial. You can do that. It's JSON, right? So you could definitely just serialize, deserialize with your preferred tool, but your library actually does more. So why not using it?
Yeah, there's certain out of the box functionality for serializing some for productively working with the twins, the instances of the models. Becomes out of the box now from the Azure team, which is quite good. And we just extended on that to add the model capability, and a little bit more around the instance side.
Nice, nice. So do you want to walk us through what this library looks like in terms of APIs and so on?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess I'll just start with maybe a unit test
Mm-hmm.
example. So this is a simple unit test that does two things. It serializes a model, and then it creates an instance of that model and serializes it as well, and writes it to the output. As you can see, creating the instance is exactly like you would create anything else in C#.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go ahead and run that. As you can see here, this is the model that was generated,
Okay.
just like we showed you in the slide. And then here's the DTDL
Perfect.
for the instance.
Perfect. And it took what, 2 lines of code?
Yeah, super simple. Bam, bam. We also
Easy.
benchmarked this heavily, and I have those here if you'd like to see that as well, using
And by the way, I have
.NET.
to say, I love that you're doing a demo in a unit test. It tells people about how you developed and how you approach development. Like I like that.
Yeah, trying to do the right thing, set a good example for the rest of the teams.
Yeah, exactly. Anything else you wanted to highlight in the library real quick?
Well, I'm happy to go through more of the code if you want, but
We can go a little bit more. We're already sometime into the presentation. I think people are getting it anyways. I think we are at a stage where they're just
yeah, I
like,
do too.
okay, so now I need to go test it and try it out. More than that, Jason, you open sourced it. So why? I mean, you've been developing that library and in your day to day and for your teams. So I know the answer, and I think people know it, but it's interesting to have your perspective on why open sourcing a piece of code like that that is from your company and from your teams.
Well, my company, Telstra, has aligned strategically with Microsoft around
Mm-hmm.
IoT and digital twins, as you know. And so we felt that it was important to involve not just our internal teams, but also the community.
Yeah.
So we presented it to our marketing teams, and they approved it to open source this lib. It's also useful because we have many libraries that we use internally, but this particular library doesn't require any of our other subsystems, and so it's possible to open source it and have it be useful. So yeah,
love it, Jason. That's awesome. If you want to give a try to that library, you can go to this link that we're showing down there, aka.ms/IoT show/code first digital twins. Easy enough. Jason, thanks for your time and demo today. Really appreciate, besides presenting the library itself, open sourcing it for the community. People can contribute, right? PRs, issues are welcome on the repo.
Yeah, please do.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for watching the IoT Show today. Thanks, Jason, again for coming, and hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.